Welcome to episode 174 of the G2 on 5G. It's the latest insight scoop on everything 5G. We cover 6 topics in about 20 minutes, and it's brought to you by More Insights and Strategy. I'm Will Townsend, and joining me again this week is fellow analyst Anshul Sag. And we're going to get started with our special end of 2023 review. So we're going to be taking a stab at some of the broader trends in 2023 and what he and I expect in 2024. But before we get started, how's your holiday been, my friend?
Pretty chill. I celebrated Hanukkah earlier in the month, so I got that stuff out of the way. Ironically, I didn't really get much other than like a jacket, but I did just get myself a Dyson
I
yesterday.
I saw that.
So that was kind of my big purchase for the year, other than getting the car ready for the baby coming next month. So
Yeah.
that's really the big thing, is just getting ready for the baby. And I don't know what will happen with the podcast for the first few weeks, but I'm hoping that it won't be too long of a gap between episodes.
Yeah, for our viewers and listeners that may not be familiar with this news, Anshul and his wife are expecting their first child. So super excited for the two of you. I have 2 daughters. They are grown up and they are out of the house. And I had a great time with them as well. I had to do separate celebrations with them because they live literally in opposite, parts of the world. So my youngest is a chemical engineer, first year with Halliburton, very proud of her, living in West Texas. And my oldest daughter works for a solar power company as a project manager. She was in East Texas in Longview, but she recently moved to Springdale, Arkansas. And so just coordinating with them has been challenging. I fit in a Spurs game, drove from Austin to San Antonio with a good friend of mine and my wife. We had a great time. And, I'm just worn out. It's been great, but I am looking forward to a very quiet New Year's Eve at home. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So I want to hit my first theme for the year, and I want to talk about the Satcom space race heating up. And you and I think during the course of the year, Anshul, we talked about a bunch of different mobile network operators and companies. We've talked about Verizon and SpaceX. They were the first to announce their partnership with not a lot of detail. We've certainly talked about AT&T and AST SpaceMobile. I'm actually wearing, if you can see, an AT&T shirt that says Dallas, we have a connection, and you can see the satellite image right there. So I spent, obviously considerable time with AT&T. We've talked about, that relationship with AST. Just recently, you and I talked about Rogers and Lynk. We've also talked about Amazon Project Kuiper,
Kuiper.
Kuiper
Kuiper is
satellite
the one with
OT.
Amazon,
Yeah, the one with Amazon
and that's with
satellite.
Verizon.
Yeah, exactly. Satellite OT or satellite, and
Satellia. I
many
call it Satelliate.
to tell you, whatever. I'm so tired right now, but and I can't blame jet lag for that. But man, it is a space race. There are tons of kind of competing solutions out there. Some are based on 3GPP standards, like we've spoken about before. Others are not. Some are designed to deliver, more than just the middleware solution that AST SpaceMobile is aiming to do, for example, with SpaceX and Amazon. But I mean, it's a crowded market, and at the end of the day, the question I come up with is, can we call a winner? And I don't think we can. I do believe at Mobile World Congress Barcelona in February of next year, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to low Earth orbit and the use of terrestrial spectrum and how that can bridge the digital divide. And all these companies that we've spoken about this year have different strategies and architectures to go about it. If I were to just call, a company that I believe is in the pole position, I would have to lean towards AST SpaceMobile, just because what they're doing, and again, they are further behind in their commercial deployment than say SpaceX is, but their overall strategy and architecture to not necessarily monetize the service, but serve as the middleware, I think that's a winner. But again, I really believe next year we're going to see a lot of activity around Mobile World Congress Barcelona. I'm going to meet with many of these companies. I've already begun to set up those meetings with them. And so I think it's exciting. I mean, I think this is great. We've talked about low Earth orbit, well before this year, but really this year was its coming out, and I expect big things in 2024. But would love to get your insight here.
Yeah, I agree that there is no clear winner here. Um, I do think there was a clear loser. I think that's one that we can call out is definitely Qualcomm's Snapdragon Space,
Yeah,
Snapdragon Satellite, sorry,
yeah,
because they basically gave up on it. So I
yeah,
think we can call a clear loser. Um, I do think there are some interesting things happening in the market, but I think having a conversation with MediaTek that we had, it's quite clear that we're still a few years away from being even able to call a winner.
right.
Um, and I do like your call that AST SpaceMobile may be in the pole position, especially when you consider that Verizon and Project Kuiper still are doing initial test satellites. T-Mobile and SpaceX still haven't really given much of an update.
Yeah.
Rogers and Lynk just did a test call, so I think everyone's still pretty much at the starting blocks, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I do think this is going to be more of a marathon than a sprint. So
hmm
we're going to see a lot of handing of the baton over, from one company to the next. I do think we'll see some consolidation. We might even see some companies maybe move from one partner to the next.
Yeah.
But I like that there's a lot of choice out there. There's a lot of
hmm
opportunity, and the geo guys are still trying to find a way to get involved. Seems to be more for emergency satellite communications, like for what Apple's doing with Globalstar. But I think long term, I think the one thing that maybe is missed on people is I truly believe there will be a point where it becomes mandated for emergency 911 services to have satellite connectivity. And once that
Yeah.
mandate goes through, it kind of um, cements satellite as no longer being a fad, but
Right.
actually becoming something that becomes necessary and required. And I think that
hmm
will happen with time, maybe in the next few years as these things start to mature a bit. But I just think
Yeah.
that it's one of those scenarios like how many times can you think about it where you're in the middle of nowhere and you need to be able to make up that phone call and there's no
Yeah.
service. Like
Right.
that's got to be a bare minimum for everybody.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I'm hoping that we'll see that happen down the road.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm confident will too. To your point, we're early in here, but I do think 2023 was sort of the year of Leo's coming out, and I think there's much more in store next year. So it's exciting. Let's move to your first theme of the year, and you want to talk about fixed wireless. I'm glad you picked this one because it is truly the first killer app for 5G.
Yeah. So the question is, one, or the statement is it's first true killer app for 5G, but also how much runway is there left?
Yeah,
Um, One of the things I think is really interesting is, we have seen this year really be the year for fixed wireless growth, even late last year. And normally something like this doesn't really have a lot of runway. The spectrum runs out or speeds start to decline. But there was a really interesting report that came out from Ookla not a week ago or so, and they were basically saying that first of all, T-Mobile and Verizon's fixed wireless service are not only gaining customers solidly, um, but they are also keeping speeds at an equal level, which means they're increasing the spectrum and availability of bandwidth for
yeah.
fixed wireless. So combined in Q3, so we don't actually know Q4 numbers yet, but combined in Q3 alone, Verizon and T-Mobile accounted for nearly 7 million fixed wireless customers.
hmm
T-Mobile had 4.2 million and Verizon had 2.6 million. So almost 7 million customers, which is incredible. Um, and when you think about that, 7 million customers, almost all of those are coming out of Spectrum and Comcast, which mean and honestly, I don't know if you've seen this. I have seen this here in San Diego. The amount
Yeah,
of TV ads, billboards, online ads, TikToks I'm seeing of Cox and Spectrum poo-pooing 5G internet. It's like, okay,
right.
if it wasn't a real threat, they wouldn't be spending millions of dollars on ads trying to, poo-poo 5G internet. But the reality is, that the Comcasts and the Spectrums of the world really aren't providing a good service.
Yeah.
And T-Mobile and Verizon are there to offer potentially the only other option in a lot of these markets where these cable operators have effective monopoly. Now, I'll add to the validation of what Ookla said. They said, in Q4 of last year, the actual download speed for T-Mobile was 119 megabits per second, and
Yeah.
now it's 122. So it's actually gone up 3 megabits. For
Yeah.
Verizon, it started at 94, and now it's up to like 120, about 122 as well.
Yeah.
So both companies are really seeing a huge improvement in, or at least a continuous improvement of speeds as they add customers, which is, you know, you can't really say that of almost any other technology out there for
Right.
connectivity.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think that when you look at how big Xfinity and Spectrum really are, and how dissatisfied people are with that service, there's a real big opportunity for what's going to happen for competitiveness and user experience. And it's a very simple application, but I do think it's going to continue to grow, especially as both Verizon and T-Mobile add more of that C-band spectrum that they bid for in the B and C blocks.
Yeah, and you almost mentioned AT&T. We did talk about them this year. They launched their Air consumer service, and it's in limited markets. They're being very surgical about that, given their investment in fiber. And so I think we'll see these numbers continue to increase. AT&T will pick up consumer subscribers as well. And and at the end of the day, I mean, I'm so in Bastrop, Texas, where I live now. I'm on T-Mobile's FWA service, and I've actually seen an improvement from, I'm seeing download speeds as high as 140 and 150 now. I do believe over time, as they build out their standalone in the mid-band, that's going to improve as well. But to your point, to be adding some of these subscribers and to see the performance increasing is pretty phenomenal. And I believe on one of our podcasts, I spoke to the fact that initially T-Mobile at the beginning of this year was very aggressive on some of their projections, and then they pull those projections back wisely because of that very thing, right? You're putting more FWA subscribers on the network. The profile of that customer tends to consume more bandwidth, and so that puts pressure on things there. But yeah, I'm
I just
expecting to
wanted to
see.
add some more data. First
Yeah.
of all, this Ookla report's really good. I think you should read it if you get a chance.
Yeah.
There's so much detail that I can't really cover, but one really interesting thing is Ookla is actually able to look at user data and see where the users are going to and from. And they said that the vast majority of Verizon and T-Mobile's customers are coming from cable and DSL providers.
Yeah.
And if you look at the fixed access new recruits, for distribution of 5G FWA gross additions by ISP, a huge chunk of them are coming from Spectrum and Xfinity, as well as
Yeah.
AT&T Internet. So
For sure.
it's really exciting to see. And the other thing I was going to add that I thought was really interesting is there is a gap between urban and rural FWA. And there's actually a lot of people in urban areas that are using FWA, which is really interesting. But
Yeah.
even in rural areas, the median download speeds for T-Mobile are 91 megabits, and for Verizon, they're 51. So people are getting access to way faster internet out in rural areas that they otherwise literally could not even buy if they wanted to, because a lot of these DSL plans are like 5, 10, 15,
Terrible.
maybe 20. So it's really, really an amazing product, and I think we're going to continue to see that grow throughout the year.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, let's jump to my second topic. We may go longer than 20 minutes with our end here, but so my second sort of theme of the year is I want to talk about Open RAN, and is it a boom or a bust? And so as we started the year, we saw Rakuten stumble with Symphony. We saw executives exit. We saw reorganization. Quite frankly, they were sipping their own champagne and eating their own dog food and wanting to market that to other mobile network operators. and that wasn't a success. So, and then, consequently, we've seen a lot of, trials and proof of concepts, but not a lot of production deployment until recently. And you and I spoke about the big watershed announcement between AT&T and Ericsson, where AT&T wants to drive, 70+% of its network traffic over open standard infrastructure. And I forget the year, 2025, 2026. It's a very aggressive goal. But that really sort of validates things. And then, we've also spoken about NTT DoCoMo and the OREX platform. So when I spent time with NTT at their R&D forum in Tokyo in November, I learned more about that and was briefed on that. And they're taking a similar approach to Rakuten, but NTT is a much larger organization, very broad, very deep. I'm going to actually be invited to their upgrade event in San Francisco in the spring, and I'm looking forward to that and spending time with the team that's based in California there. But at the end of the day, I don't think we can call it a boom or a bust. The adoption curve has not been aggressive. But I do believe with this late breaking announcement between AT&T and Ericsson, I think there'll be a lot of lessons learned from putting Open RAN in a brownfield network environment, which is inherently much more difficult than it is in a net new greenfield, such as Rakuten, such as Dish. We've seen Dish's stumbles as well. I don't want to beat the Dish horse on this podcast, but there are lots of challenges, and when it comes right down to it, it's integration, and that's the key there. And so it's going to be really interesting. So it'll be great to see the progress that AT&T and Ericsson make as we move into next year. But I do think there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm not gonna call Open RAN a loser. There are a lot of benefits in disaggregating the infrastructure and using open standards, especially in domesticating the supply chain, which is what the U.S. government has wanted to do, to wean itself off of not only Chinese infrastructure, but infrastructure from the European providers in Ericsson and Nokia and others. So I'll let you weigh in on this, but are you going to call Open RAN a boom or a bust this year?
I am of the camp that if we were talking about it mid-year, I would have said a bust.
Yeah.
But I feel like we hit rock bottom and have since shot back up. So I think really the AT&T Ericsson announcement has reinvigorated the market.
Sure.
I think, and it has validated a lot of the things that people have tried to claim for a long time, but we were just waiting for a tier one operator to implement.
Yeah.
And I think with AT&T going as hard with Ericsson as they are, and claiming that they're going to go, I think you said 70%, right?
Yeah.
So doing that in such a short period of time, I think implies that AT&T is serious about this, and so is Ericsson. And this helps Ericsson because we've talked about this before. They were struggling with competing with the market on Open RAN and having something that was considered to be leading class, but we know that AT&T would in no way go for anything that wasn't the best in class. So
Yeah.
I think we're going to see some things change a lot. And I think next year will be a big year for Open RAN, and I think we'll probably see a lot of excitement at MWC, and probably it'll feel like the life has been breathed back into Open RAN.
Yeah. Yeah. I think NTT DoCoMo is going to sort of pick up the torch where Rakuten Symphony left off. I'm not writing Rakuten off at all, but I think they'll carry the momentum forward. I think, again, there'll be a lot of lessons learned, but from the AT&T and Ericsson relationship. Vodafone in Europe has been very aggressive with Open RAN. They have been deploying it and in production in small pockets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we'll continue to see that expand, and we'll probably learn more about their progress at Mobile World Congress Barcelona as well. But let's move to your second topic, and this is sort of tied to a slowdown in RAN spending. You and I have spoken about this on a couple of our podcasts, but Ericsson and Nokia, they're sort of struggling right now in certain ways, and you want to sort of talk about that as networks now have had the
Yes.
RAN deployed, and they're moving to the core and the standalone. So
Yeah. So this is more of like a talk about the transition of spending away from RAN towards core, but
yeah,
also like the way that Ericsson and Nokia's investors have interpreted this transition. Because if you look at their last year or so, both companies' stocks have not done well.
yeah,
Both of them have struggled since 2021, and they've both missed multiple quarters of earnings. Both of these companies have $20 billion market caps, while they have $26 billion in revenue. So
yeah,
that's kind of a staggering thing. But that's share price is a concept of future profits and future
yeah,
revenues, not current. Um, and I think the real thing that has turned the tide for Ericsson at least is the AT&T deal. If you look at their share price, it went through the roof after the announcement. Uh,
yeah,
wasn't in a good place, so it's not really in a great place right now, but it's in a much better place than it was a month ago. Um, but I think when you look at what these companies do, you're seeing Ericsson stay with its core business, even though it did write off that big Vonage acquisition.
yeah,
Um, and Nokia is selling off business units again.
yeah,
Um, I struggle with what the future of Nokia will be. And we saw them do a big rebrand earlier this year. They really
mhm,
tried to reintroduce themselves as a services company,
yeah,
and that might
and
be because
enterprise, yeah, enterprise
enterprise, right?
company as well. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think that may be their opportunity down the road, because maybe they don't see RAN as a big opportunity anymore. But I do believe that Open RAN is a big opportunity still, maybe longer term. But I think we're going to see Ericsson maybe become the last remaining big infrastructure provider, and everybody else becomes these smaller Open RAN providers where you have more um, specialized infrastructure for different types of applications. And maybe it's just all programmable with Open RAN, right? So
yeah,
I think that might be the direction we move in, especially if Ericsson moves more towards Open RAN, and maybe Open RAN ends up being the solution to a lot of these problems. But ultimately, I think we still have to focus on the core, and I think there's going to be a lot of focus on the core in 2024.
yeah,
And I think that's going to be because standalone is the only way that I believe that these 5G networks will be able to monetize their investments, and actually satisfy users' discontent with the state of 5G.
yeah,
And I think focusing on core standalone might actually even increase demand for infrastructure, especially when you look at, like, let's say, millimeter wave. That was kind of a bust for a lot of reasons. But as people start using 5G more regularly, um, maybe there's actually a need for more RAN. Maybe it's all millimeter wave, small cells, but to fill in the gaps in terms of capacity where it's needed most as 5G applications grow. So, I think as more demand grows, there might be an opportunity for more these infrastructure companies to start to, build out more infrastructure. But right now, I think
yeah.
it's more about the core than it is about the RAN. And I think that's kind of hurt both Ericsson and Nokia in the last year or so.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think 2024 will be the year of standalone, and that's an investment in the core part of the network. Um, I'm not gonna call Nokia out here. I think they've got some assets in their portfolio, and they've got some capabilities and some strengths that they can lean into. They've built a pretty compelling private networking portfolio. They've had a considerable lead on others in that regard. And but Nokia's had its challenges, sort of the up and down, over the last several years. But there's new management in place, like you mentioned. It was actually at Mobile World Congress, Barcelona this year, where they launched their new brand mark, their focus on, as you mentioned, services and enterprise. They have Nuage, which is an SD-WAN solution. So they have all the right components to make a run at enterprise. They're divesting some businesses that they need to divest, but I still think the ecosystem is healthier with Ericsson and Nokia, and we haven't even spoken about Samsung Networks. They've really emerged as a leader when it comes to vRAN in particular. And hey, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Samsung didn't even come up in the conversation when it came up, when the conversation was about, radio access network infrastructure. So I think competition is a good thing. I always like to say competition breeds innovation, but yeah, I think 2024 will be the year of the core. But let's move to my third and final theme of the year. And hey, man, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about AI, right? I mean, oh my gosh, you could basically state that 2023 was the year for Gen AI. So, but my thought process is like, did AI move the needle within telecom and 5G deployments? And earlier in the year, there was an announcement when NVIDIA did their big event around what they're doing with AT&T, leveraging AI for intelligent truck rolls to support network deployments and field service and that sort of thing. There's been lots of broader conversations around how AI can improve security within the network fabric, resilience, and self-healing. Although from my perspective, when I look back at this year, other than the AT&T and NVIDIA announcement, and hey, if I'm missing something, let me know. But it was really more sort of general conversations about the opportunity with AI. And again, Gen AI is only about a year old, and there's some tremendous opportunities with Gen AI when it comes to call center personnel and supporting customers and providing a better customer experience and that sort of thing with faster resolution of issues and that sort of thing. So I do think, AI is not new, right? So this whole notion of AI ops has been around for quite some time within the enterprise and certainly within public mobile networks. But I do believe that, another big theme, and I'm kind of using our end of year podcast as sort of a preview for MWC Barcelona, in addition to low Earth orbit, I do believe there'll be a lot of focus and discussion around artificial intelligence and what that can do for telecom operators and 5G networks. So, but what do you think? What's sort of your assessment on AI within telecom this year?
I think there's a lot of thought around how AI will be used. And I do think to your point, AT&T was a really good application of that, at least for NVIDIA.
Yeah,
Um, but I think there's still a lot more AI to be used. I think what you did miss was how AI has made its way into the modem and how much
good point.
on the Qualcomm side, and there's so much AI already built into the modem, and there's
Yeah,
dedicated AI hardware in the modem. It's not even using AI hardware elsewhere in the chip, so that's a big deal. And then also they were showing some research, and I think this is going to be stuff that we'll probably see at MWC and moving onward, which is pre-training models that run in the 5G network that work in concert with the AI in the modem to maximize signal, reduce power consumption, and maximize throughput. And I think
yeah,
that's going to be how we see AI used first. But I think there's going to be so many other AI applications for 5G. But I think that's kind of like the beginning of it, and we'll probably see a lot more evolving at MWC. CES, I think, will be pretty light, but
yeah,
MWC will see a lot of AI because everyone's going to want to talk about it. The AI hype was a little too early last year for
yeah.
MWC to really take hold of it in a meaningful manner. But now that we've had
Hmm.
almost a full year of AI hype with ChatGPT and all the other Gen AI, I think
Yeah,
see a much bigger growth of a focus on AI and 5G, and a lot more people actually showing how they're going to implement it or how they've already implemented it, like some
yeah,
companies. But yeah, I think you're right. It's going to be this is like a second gear of AI hype in
yeah,
2024. First gear was last year. This year's second gear. There's going to be a
yeah,
lot of talk about AI on the PC side this year. You're going to see a lot of that. That'll probably be very heavily during CES, but I have a feeling
Right.
there will be some, talk about how 5G is the connectivity for AI, because not all AI workloads are going to work locally, and not all workloads are going to work on the cloud, and you're going to need to have that connectivity regularly and pretty consistently to be able to send those models or workloads back and forth. So that's something to
For
consider
sure.
when it comes to AI and 5G.
Yeah, for sure. I'll just end with, I've often talked about like AI and edge computing, and its ability to supercharge use cases. And so as developers, have had their hands on, a lot of, generative, AI, and, there are so many models, that public models that are being, provided now and produced that people can play with. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of sort of innovative applications with respect to AI. And I think in telecom networks, security is a big opportunity because we've talked about some mobile network operators that have had breaches, and AI can be used as a tool to sort of counteract these bad actors. They're certainly going to leverage AI, so it's like kind of call it a double-edged sword there. But I do expect that we're going to hear a lot more about it next year. But
All I was just going to
let's.
add was Singtel was the other one that had a big announcement with NVIDIA on AI and 5G.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I that's right. I do recall that one. So thanks for reminding me, and thanks for reminding me about all of the AI that's being integrated into devices. That's definitely your coverage area. So you reminded me about that. But let's wrap the podcast. And hey, it wouldn't be a year-end podcast unless we talked about 6G, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of hype around 6G. I don't want to really spend too much time on it, to be honest with
Yeah,
you. I think the one thing is, one, should we start thinking about 6G now, or should we wait for 5G to shake out? And I think
yeah,
the answer to that is we should really start thinking about 6G, because the research for it has already begun. Basically, once the 5G was done, 6G research began, and I have a feeling some of it even started before 5G was finalized. Um, I do think when you look at the research cycle, it is at 10 years about. So we'll probably see around 2030. And that's still 7 years away. So the way I look at it is, right now we should be figuring out where we think there are deficiencies in 5G. Release 18 is going to be finished next year. Release 19 is going to be like a transitionary between 5G and 6G, and that'll probably be a 2025 or 2026 thing. And then we'll
yeah,
probably get release 20 with 6G, and release 20 will most likely come in 2026 or 2027, which will then be available and used in 2028, 2029. So I think that's a normal cadence. I don't think terahertz is going to be a thing. There was talk about using, even higher frequencies. I think we're
right,
already struggling enough with millimeter wave as it is.
for sure.
We have enough things that we need to figure out with millimeter wave that, unless we figure those out, terahertz is a waste of time and literal energy.
Yeah,
Um, and I just think that we should really be focusing on, one, how do we get the most out of the network, which I think is going to be an AI accelerated thing, and also how can we accelerate the different industries that 5G opened up to us with its broader applications. So
yeah,
maybe there are going to be more specific improvements to XR, which we're seeing in release 18, or maybe to agriculture or transportation. I think the 5G standard 3GPP is really good. I just think that um, not everything ends up getting used. And I think there are going to be some things that maybe just end up slipping to 6G or to later releases, and things were already kind of part of the standard. So this kind of happens with every generation. There's talk about 5G broadcast. We had broadcast in 4G, didn't do that well. Maybe it'll
yeah,
happen in 5G. Maybe it'll happen in 6G. Who knows? But I just think that I think 6G is slightly premature, but I also think we shouldn't ignore it. And I think we're still, 6 or 7 years away from that. So that is a long time in the mobile, industry. So I think you and I will happily rename this podcast when it's appropriate. But for now, I think we're still going to stick to 5G.
yeah. I agree with you. I think, hey, it's prudent to be doing initial investigations and in academia, and we've sort of spoken about that as well. But but focus on, I think, you and I have talked about the mobile network operator community, needing to focus on getting standalone deployed. That's going to unlock the true promise of 5G from a latency, throughput, device support, security standpoint, et cetera. But yeah, just be measured, be balanced with that. I may in 2024 decide to attend some of these 6G forum events. We'll see. I'm not going to jump completely into the deep end of the pool on that, but yeah, I think we will be hearing more and more about 6G and next year as well. But it's been a great podcast. We went a little bit long, but we had a lot to talk about. But why don't you take us home?
Absolutely. We hope our viewers and listeners found this week's topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide insights on a specific 5G topic for a future podcast, please reach out to us on social media. Will is at Willtown Tech, and I'm at Anshel Sag. We hope you have a great weekend, and please tune in next week. And don't forget to rate and subscribe, and have a happy new year.